Long before the capital had a name, this road was already here. Barrio del Tránsito began as nothing more than a path through the dust. In Monte Palma's early years, the port and the interior needed to connect. So a wide, practical corridor was laid out, straight and unceremonious, built for movement rather than for beauty. At first, there was just noise. But where movement slows, commerce appears. Repair garages, food stalls and boarding houses sprang up to serve the workers. Buildings rose quickly and cheaply. Nothing here was meant to last forever. Everything was meant to be useful. As the civic core took shape nearby, this corridor only grew busier. It became the route everyone passed through, but few claimed. Too loud to live comfortably. Too important to remove. By the mid-20th century, the area had a name that reflected exactly what it was. Barrio del Tránsito, the neighborhood of passage.
Hello, and welcome back to Monte Palma. For this week's episode, I'm going to be building something that I haven't really built in the Monte Palma region yet. And that is, this essentially is going to be this connector road to the highway. And everything along here is going to be essentially a modern city. It's not going to be anything historic. It wouldn't look out of place in pretty much any other modern city in the world today. And that's like a reflection of cities in general as they become more modern. There's this convergence of how everything starts to look. There is nothing really unique about it. Looks like any other place in the world, I guess, is the kind of look we're going for. There might be certain regional differences like density and building standards and stuff, like types of buildings, but the overall look, like the businesses, the commercial storefronts, everything looks North America, South America, Europe, it all looks the same now. And that's what I'm going to be building in this episode. First thing I'm going to be figuring out is the road layout. I want it to be a bit of a grid, but I also need it to conform to the road layout that's already been established. Right along our main road, standard grid, and then as we move out, it will deform and conform to the roads around it. because there really isn't anything interesting about this neighborhood, our main focal point is going to be the main street down here, and I'm just adding a bit of parking to the sides here to make it a little more visually interesting, so it's just not one long giant strip. Very first buildings that we're putting down are the apartment blocks right along the highway. This is fairly common in pretty much any modern city. The property values out here would be a lot lower, so the types of buildings built out here would be for lower income people, and it's really about, they're basically people warehouses, so they're not attractive, and they're usually built on areas with lower land values, like right beside a highway. I thought this was looking a little too symmetrical, so I'm going to delete out one of these parking strips. And I'm going to be hand placing pretty much every building here. It's just to get the skyline I want. I want a particular type of density right along the main stretch here. Some of the buildings can look a little older, but we're not really going for anything older than, say, the mid 20th century, so like around 1950. We don't want anything to look older than that. It's a fairly new neighborhood. I'm going to be using a lot of Japanese buildings. I think they probably look the best for this sort of build. I'm also going to be splicing buildings together to create new versions, things that make more sense. Like I said, we're going for a particular type of density. I'm also going to bring things up closer to the actual sidewalks. The setbacks on a lot of these buildings, this seems to be a little too extreme. I feel like things should be built right up to the sidewalk. So I'm going to try to do that in this build. This is a nice custom asset by Heartfelt. And these are also custom assets. I can't remember the name off the top of my head. And this is going to be a fairly dense neighborhood. It's almost all going to be apartment blocks right down by the main road here, and we're going to taper off the density as we build up the hillside back towards our residential housing. Now, I have no commercial demand in the city at the moment, so it's going to take a while for these buildings to fill in with commercial businesses. Now this is going to be a main road connecting, obviously it connects right now to the highway, but it's going to follow through to the other coastline and connect urban centers over there. And eventually it's also going to connect to an airport. So it might not look like too much traffic at the moment, but in the not so distant future, this is going to be a very busy road. There aren't really any historic buildings in this neighborhood, but there might be the odd one. I'm going to place the crematorium down for that. Right along the train station here, I thought this might require more higher density, so we're going to be using the Chinese, I think it's a shopping mall. I'm going to be using it as like an office complex. It might be like mall shopping on the ground floor, but the rest of it is going to be office. And right beside it, I'm going to be putting in a large parking lot to accommodate all the cars for it. There's not a lot of street parking, so once again I'm going to be making custom parking lots all over the place here just to accommodate some of the cars. Most of the apartment blocks in here are going to be medium density apartment blocks with the odd residential high-rise as well. I'm going to get rid of these. I thought I would like them here, but they're just too big and bulky, and I can't recolor them to any color that actually looks suitable for what I'm doing here. So eventually they're going to go. This isn't going to be like a poor area of the city, and most of the buildings here are going to be fairly new. Quite a few of these were probably built in the 21st century as the density kept increasing. I'm going to say maybe about 1960s, 1970s. Monte Palma probably went for a bit of a population boom. There probably been a huge increase to number of people being born, and also everybody would probably start migrating into the cities. This sort of neighborhood is a kind of reflection of that sort of increasing densification of the urban centers. Now I'm still dealing with some odd hilly terrain here, and getting the buildings to work is always a challenge. Here I'm using, on one side of the road, I'm using functional vanilla assets, and on the back side we're going to use static assets to make it conform to the hillside a little better. And here's a little view of how this is starting to shape up. We can start to see a very modern city starting to form here. There's a lot of interesting assets in the Netherlands asset pack here, and the brick color is not necessarily suitable, but if I recolor them white, I find they blend in fairly well. I don't know if they're totally appropriate, but I'm going to use a few of them. I'm not going to get crazy with them. Now with this boulevard running up the hillside here, we're going to, as we get to near the top, going to increase some density with some row homes. At the very top, we're going to have residential housing. I'm not going to show too much of this. That was the focus of the last episode, so I don't really feel like I need to repeat it again. Anyway, so I'm going to skip over the placement of a lot of these houses, but it's the same process I used in the last episode. And yeah, I'm going to get rid of these. This lot is too large, so I'm going to break it up and make it a little smaller and put some smaller sized buildings. I think that's a little more appropriate for this neighborhood. These are fairly nice homes, but we're not really talking about tenement housing. I have a bit of a traffic jam here. People moving in is the main issue, but I do have a lot of trucks turning here to try to get over to the port, so I'm going to be adding an extra lane in here to accommodate them. I really don't like this green they chose for the meridians here, so I'm going to try covering up with another surface, see if we can make it look a little better. This is going to be Gaga XM's, one of his grass surfaces. And I'm going to turn this into a tree-lined street here. I'm also going to be experimenting with splicing more buildings together. I quite enjoy doing this. It's a lot of fun trying to figure out how to make unique buildings out of what we have here. And I'm always constantly checking the skyline to make sure the building heights and everything look appropriate for what I'm building. For the static assets I'm putting down, obviously we're going to be using the service blocks to give them functionality. These ones are going to turn into office buildings. I'm trying to organize my detailing a little better so I'm not jumping all over the map constantly, which is difficult to edit, and also just for a little more continuity for what I'm building here. So how I'm going to be approaching the detailing for this episode is I'm going to break it down to stages. So the first stage was placing all the buildings, make sure the layout of the streets and the buildings are the way I want. The second pass is going to be filling in all the surfaces, make sure everything connects. And then the third pass, I'm going to come through and pick out a few areas just to bump up the detailing just a little bit to give them a little more character. And in this phase, also just making sure the surfaces make sense. Like right here, it doesn't make sense like this, so we're just going to make it a little smaller. And fill in the backside here with a parking lot. For the police station, we're going to get rid of the vanilla props that come with it, and we're just going to replace them with surfaces and trees that make a little more sense for our particular region. really do like Dome's little parking lots here. These are so useful for filling in all these little awkward little areas, making them a little more functional. This building here is causing some issues with terrain, like it's buckling along the road where you can see it here of the parking lots. And the way I'm going to fix this is I'm going to select everything, remove it, and then level it out to the road. And that will smooth out most of that bumpiness so it doesn't look nearly as bad. And with using static assets, always there's going to be a bit of jankiness with the buildings, and some carefully placed trees go a long way to disguise some of that. Behind these buildings and along the side of the train station here, I have a bit of an odd empty space. I'm going to just fill it in with a tile surface here and draw out an invisible path over top of it to create a little shortcut for the citizens to get over to the train station. This could use a little bit more detailing than what I put in here. I skimped out a bit here. Now this is a bit odd, but the main star of this particular episode is this particular road. I need to figure out ways to detail it up in a way that make it look a little more interesting. Even though it's just a road, it's going to be fairly visible. It's going to be a lot of flyover, so I got to figure out a way to make it visually interesting. One thing I'm going to do here is for this particular section with this parking road in behind, I'm going to use some paving stones in here to unify all the surfaces. Make it look like it's a shopping complex that either might be all the same developer, or there was something like the city had some sort of say in here how this particular section of road was developed, so it all looks uniform. It also makes it stand out a little bit from the rest of the road. It gives it a bit of uniqueness. For this particular episode, I think I struggled a little bit with what was the appropriate level of detailing for this area. I don't consider it like a point of interest, so it doesn't require like heavy detailing, but it also does require a bit of detailing because it's going to be fairly visible a lot of the time. I don't think I quite got it up to the level that it really needs in this particular episode. I don't think I show any of this in the video, but for this area right next to the railroad, just going to turn it into some light industrial, and rather than a paved surface, we're going to fill it in with some gravel. For the next episode, I think we're going to be detailing out the rail yard and the port, so I can come back in there and work on that a little bit more. These particular block of apartments in here, I don't really feel like I really did much of any real detailing to these. I don't really know how much it needs, to be honest. Once again, I'm pulling buildings up to the curve because the setbacks don't really make a lot of sense to me sometimes. And giving this a bit of a color change because I think I've already used one of these fairly close by. I really like these Japanese. I think these are mixed residential or commercial, I'm not exactly sure. But the vanilla version of them comes with these parking lots attached to the side, and I think they look so much better as like little blocks like this. Something that's happened since the update, but this grass color, I don't remember this from before. I think it's new. I can't say I'm a huge fan of it, at least not in my tropical environment here. It stands out like a sore thumb, and I thought I'd do a little experiment here, see if we can disguise it a bit. I'm not really happy with that at all. In a different map with different environment, it might be suitable. I don't think it really works here, so we're going to get rid of it. I'm not sure if there are any gas stations in Monte Palma yet. I don't think any have spawned in naturally. So I'm just going to place one down here. It's fairly close to the highway. I think that makes some sense. I also don't want to necessarily fill in every single lot with houses and apartment blocks. So here I'm going to just detail this out as an empty lot. It might be connected to the apartment building next to it, or it just might be a lot that hasn't been developed yet. Dealing with very steep terrain is always an issue. The buildings simply don't work very well, so I have to get a little creative here of making these work. Some conveniently placed shrubs and bushes and flowers here to hide some of the weirdness going on. From this point forward, I don't think I'm ever really going to use this crematorium here as an actual crematorium. It's just a static asset. It's some sort of historic building in the area that's being preserved. I always thought there's many better options now for crematoriums and death care. To be honest, I think this is much more suitable to be in some sort of historic building in cities rather than the actual crematorium. In future builds, I think that's what I'm always going to be just using this for. Now, I have been getting some feedback about how I'm building out this entire region, these neighborhoods and the cities. Tips on how to make things look a little more authentic to the area I'm building. It has been brought to my attention that I'm probably not including enough fences and enclosures to the properties. It makes some sense. I think what I'm going to be doing here is doing a little more research, finding out, locating unique neighborhoods, and then rather than trying to build them everywhere, pick out certain locations in the area and then make neighborhoods specifically to represent certain types of neighborhoods and that sort of thing. For the elementary school, I'm just going to be expanding its footprint to fill in the entire block. For the second pass of detailing here, we're going to bump up the details on some of the buildings here. We're going to be spending a fair amount of time paying a little more attention to some of the roofs here. I think this is a very easy detailing trick that implies a lot of detail without having to detail up all the sides of the buildings and everything like that. I think it's a bit of a shortcut that works really well. I wish they would spend more attention to detailing the rooftops of buildings. Obviously, some of these are static assets, so the props are all stripped away. Like just the surfaces, because you spend so much time looking down at them, it would make a little more sense that these had a little more detail to them. Some of them are going to get this basic staining decals, and others are going to get more like moss surfaces and peeling surfaces and that sort of thing. I'm also going to be adding a little bit of stainage to the sides of buildings. I'm not going to get too crazy with it, just enough to indicate that weather is playing a role in how these buildings are aging. For our main star of the episode, our main road, this definitely needs a bit of a step up in the detailing effort down here. So I'm going to be doing that right now. First thing we're going to be doing is using generic Lemon's sidewalk surfaces here to cover up these vanilla sidewalks, which are just boringest shades of gray you can imagine. I don't really know what it is with this game with gray as its main color palette. It doesn't make any sense. Anyway, it's a pretty easy, quick fix for that. Not too difficult to do. For the roads themselves, I'm going to be using a detailing trick I've used in other episodes. I don't use this one too often because it is a little labor intensive, but because the road is the main attraction here, I think it deserves it. First thing we're going to be using is Broman's stain surface, light stain surface, to darken them up and give them a little more variation to the actual surface. And on top of that, we're going to be using Gaga XM's, one of his rock surfaces here, which blend, when you stack all these things together, they blend very nicely together and give you a road that looks a little more wear and tear. It's not so perfect. Of course, the labor in here is just drawing all these surfaces on top of the roads. Trying to do it for an entire city is just way too much work. But I think for this particular section of road, I think this is totally suitable. And here we get a little close-up of how this actually will look. And yeah, as you can see, that this adds so much character to the road. I'm also going to be adding Sully's sitting citizens here, just to add a bit more life to some of the neighborhoods. I'll be doing a lot of this in the background, just putting them in where they feel appropriate. I'm just going to show you a few highlights of the road detailing here. I think once you see it a few times, there's no need to watch me do it for every single road. The meridian was causing a bit more work. If I try to draw the surface over the entire area, the meridian will get colored by the surface, so I had to pay attention to that and make sure I didn't draw any surfaces over top of it just to maintain the color of it. For this parking strip, I'm going to replace this surface with a concrete surface. Once again, it's just to add a bit of visual variety, make it look a little unique. So as we're flying over it, it stands out just a little bit more. I'm also going to be adding a few cracks and stains to it as well, just to break up the monotony of sometimes you get these repetitions and patterns. Adding a bit of stainage really helps to hide that. I'm using one of Sully's stain surfaces on top here. And yeah, those, when you have all three of those things together, it really brings out the road quite a lot. Also, Static Vision's, some of Static Vision's decals don't cover sidewalks, but they cover other surfaces. Under here we have some sidewalk surfaces, and that's why it's only showing up in the very center here, and I think that's a nice little extra detail there. I'm not going to add a lot of road decals here. These obviously look nice, but trying to cover up huge areas with them is really time consuming. So I'm going to put a few down, but I'm not going to get too crazy with this. In case anybody's asking why I'm not using the bucket tool here to just speed up filling in some of these surfaces, my experience with the bucket tool, like the filler version of it, is it's not very accurate. And so half the time I find I have to come in and adjust the surfaces anyway. I don't know if it really saves any time using it, so I just draw them in by hand. And I am really enjoying using wet surfaces on the roofs now. I wish I thought of this earlier. It adds a lot of detail. Sometimes if you get the angle of light just right, you get a reflection off it, and it looks so much better. You'll really see it in these two buildings here when I start adding the water surfaces to them. I think this looks so good. Especially for a tropical environment where it's torrential downpours every afternoon, it makes sense that there would be water sitting on the roofs. Speaking of nice roofs, this is Heartfelt's custom asset. Love that texture detail up there. And for our final step, I've been plugging away, working on some custom advertisements for the city. I'm focusing on advertisements that they're not a particular business in the city, but they're just generic sorts of advertisements. Somebody would buy the advertising space in these billboards and put up just products and services from around the city. With these new advertisements, I've been spending a little more time focused on making them look a little weathered and aged, so they blend in a little bit more. Also, like the style of them, I'm trying to go for something a little more illustrative than too realistic. I think if they look too realistic, they stand out too much. If they are illustrative in nature, I think they blend into the overall city just a little bit better. Shout out to our fishing industry here. Might be a bit old school, but I kind of like it. And yeah, this just gives you an idea of the types of businesses I'm trying to represent for the city. And that brings us to the end of this episode. I'm just going to put in this final billboard here right along the highway. If you've stuck around to the very end, thank you so much. It's the strongest signal you can send to the algorithm to show this video to more people. So thank you very much. Anyway, everybody take care. And I will see you all in the next episode. Bye.